Good afternoon. So we're here obviously to discuss one of the most significant economic policy shifts that's affecting Manhattan business as well as businesses everywhere, but specifically Manhattan businesses in decades. So everything we're going to talk about today is going to be grounded in actual data, because luckily for us, we're having this conversation not long after the Federal Reserve Bank uh, has oh, sorry. We started this not long after the Federal Reserve Bank has taken some very serious time to collect real world data. So this is ultimately the thing that we want. So let me start with kind of the economic foundation of why we're having this discussion. So New York exported $91.2 billion worth of goods in 2024. That makes New York the third largest state exporter in the United States of America. So this isn't just big corporations, because 93% of the over 32,000 companies that export from New York are small and medium-sized enterprises. So again, when we say small and medium-sized enterprises, we're talking about less than 500 employees. So what's particularly important about this is that these small and medium enterprises generated 53.4% of the total export value of the state of New York. So when we talk about tariffs' potential impact on business in New York, we're talking about the operational core of Manhattan business. And I think that's really something that's very, very significant. I mean, we talk about the export economy. The export economy in 2022, which was the last year we had data for it from the Federal Trade Representative, supported 263,000 jobs just in New York alone. And I think that really puts a fine point on what exactly is at stake for us right now in this current climate. So when we look at that most recent Federal Reserve survey, it was conducted between May 2nd and May 9th, and they interviewed over 300 businesses just in New York. And this gives us some really good, unprecedented insight into what exactly is going on. Manufacturing firms reported an average tariff rate of 35%, which is 25% increase over what it was 6 months before. When we look at service firms, which is very relevant to New York City, they reported 26% average tariff rates, which is up 17% from what it was 6 months before. And the critical finding here, which is something which I think is intuitive, is that 75% of businesses claim that they are passing these increasing costs on to consumers. And because of the transparency with which they're doing this, they're being very open and saying, these tariffs are raising our costs, and we're passing those on to you. This is being accepted by consumers. So the market reality is that consumers are adjusting to this to a certain degree, as long as there is transparency, as long as businesses are being transparent, which apparently they are. When we look at a chart like this, what we're seeing is kind of the geographic concentration that exists. So Canada represents over $17 billion worth of goods exports. And that's just goods, because when we add services, that goes up to over 20%. When we add in cross-border service relationships, this shows us that Canada really is one of our most important trading partners, which is something that I think we all know. But if we notice, there are some other opportunities that are here, because exporting $44 billion to Asian Pacific countries, looking at $34.5 billion worth of exports to the rest of Asia, looking at how important Switzerland is, looking at how important Hong Kong is. What this is really showing us is that we have some opportunities. These are immediate, scalable relationships. And strategically, when we look at something like this, the infrastructure exists, the relationships are there. It's just whether or not we really lean into them. So again, manufacturing really does tell a very complex story. This is New York City. Our largest category in manufacturing in New York City is what's called miscellaneous manufactured commodities. We're talking about jewelry. So we're looking at $22.1 billion. And that includes jewelry and specialized equipment that's processed right here in Manhattan, right down the street from where I'm sitting at Lincoln Center. And so we are taking in those imported goods and we are improving upon them. And anyone who's been to the jewelry district knows what I mean when I say improved. But primary metal manufacturing is a $15 billion business. And that faces what I call a critical exposure due to the 25% tariff on Canadian steel and aluminum. So this is creating downstream cost pressures that are going to flow to construction, to development, and ultimately to retail real estate. And that's, that's really significant. And we can't forget that the potential employment impact is huge. You're looking at 232,000 jobs in 2022. So these are not abstract numbers. This represents a real economic relationship, and these current policies that we're dealing with since the beginning of the year are what's really putting the screws to us. When we talk about the service sector is obviously very relevant in Manhattan. The Federal Reserve survey showed that service firms are experiencing that same rapid price adjustment pressure as we saw with manufacturing. We're seeing 45% implementing that full pass-through, though. When we were looking generally at other firms, it was a larger issue, and they were much more open about it. But with the service firms, we're just seeing those increasing costs, and they're not really as, I'm going to say, honest with exactly how they're doing it. So what's really significant about this is within the service industry, we're looking at 546,000 workers, which is 6.8% private employment. And those people are employed by foreign-controlled companies. So these are jobs at companies that are, European companies, Asian companies that are stationed here in the United States. So 6.8% of our private sector employment in Manhattan is because of people in other countries, companies in other countries. So this is major investment. And these major investment sources like the United Kingdom, like France, as well as Canada. The Federal Reserve found that the service firms are adjusting just as quickly as the manufacturers, but they're changing their supplier relationships. They're modifying service delivery models. They're implementing transparent pricing adjustments, but maybe not as transparent as the manufacturing industry. So these cross-border business relationships are creating both vulnerabilities and opportunities. So companies with established international operations, they exist with this infrastructure and this geographic diversification that really allows them opportunities to make those changes. So the Federal Reserve documented specific adaptation strategies that businesses are actually implementing right now. Most companies are changing their sourcing locations. I mean, we heard that when the Trump administration started going after China, that a lot of companies started looking at Vietnam. They started looking at India. They started looking at alternatives. And those are not only anecdotal, but the Federal Reserve actually recorded that data, and we have proof of that. But what's one of the most important things that we notice from the Federal Reserve data is how quickly firms did this transition. So over 50% of the firms that raised prices did so within 30 days of Liberation Day. That April 2nd date kind of stood out to everyone. And it is as if a lot of companies were prepared to pivot. And so those companies implemented those transparent explanations of those external costs almost immediately, with 25% of firms absorbing the entire tariff themselves without raising prices. That other 75%, that's pretty significant, and we would expect that number is only going to go up the longer tariffs exist. So kind of the competitive implication here is that businesses that adapt systematically and are quicker to jump in and to make those changes, they capture market share. They capture that competitiveness much faster and much better than those that take their time and then have to absorb those cost changes. And, ultimately that shows up adversely affecting their bottom line. So the Federal Reserve survey captured something also very important about business planning challenges. About half, you see, it was half of the service firms expected tariffs to increase even further in the future, while a third are hoping and expect that there's going to be a decline. And we have that fundamental uncertainty with 17% of firms that really don't know what's going to happen. Now, one of those things that happened at the beginning of the year was President Trump said on day one there are going to be tariffs. And then he put it off for a month and another month and another month. And then on April 2nd, it was, we're going to have 90 deals in 90 days. Well, that 90-day deadline just passed. We have 0 deals, right? There was a concept of a deal. There was a discussion of possibly a deal with the United Kingdom, but there is no actual deal yet. So we're still waiting for certain tariffs to take place. So it's understandable that we're going to see more uncertainty as time progresses, and we see that reflected obviously in equity markets. So given that a lot of the data that we're able to collect is based on things that happened during Trump's first term in office, and that may have some bearing on the believability of some of the things that are being said, the strategic implications here are very clear. Businesses need to build adaptive capabilities rather than optimizing for specific policy scenarios. Those companies that were able to transition in 30 days, within that first 30 days from Liberation Day, they didn't do that from the ground up. They did that fully expecting that something like this was going to happen because of their expectations coming into this. And luckily, given a lot of court cases and a lot of difficulties that the administration is having with getting a lot of these tariffs physically to start taking place, we are still in a sweet spot where New York companies can adapt and prepare for potentially what may be happening. So when we're talking about that framework, based on the findings of the Federal Reserve, we can kind of look at a 90-day implementation framework that leverages the patterns that we see with the successful businesses. So those first 2 weeks we should be focusing on comprehensive vulnerability assessment, right? The survey shows that many firms underestimated their indirect exposure through supplier networks. So what we need to do is we need to quantify an understanding of what the actual import dependencies are. And I think we have an understanding. I think companies nowadays are much more aware. But if they aren't, now is that time, right, before something happens. So those weeks 3 through 6 involve coming up with those alternative supplier identifications and trying to find those relationships to build. So this isn't about cutting ties with the old. This is about coming up with new additional relationships. So the Federal Reserve data shows that forward purchasing agreements and transparent customer communication creates a foundation for a sustainable pricing adjustment. So companies that explain, look, this is where we are. These are the problems that we're experiencing. And that's the reason why we're not just exploiting this. This is about egg prices, right? This is literally, we have problems and you need to understand why these prices are going up. So the critical insight that we take away from that Federal Reserve survey is really about systematic implementation across multiple operational areas. And that's really what they should be looking for. Now, when we talk about those areas, obviously New York City, obviously Manhattan, the metropolitan area is a significant portion. And that's not jingoism. That's not me saying, hey, I'm sitting in New York, so New York is great. That is me literally looking at the data and saying that New York City is where it is at. When we look at the economy of the state of New York City is the true center of regional coordination opportunities. So when we look at what the federal government refers to as New York, Newark, New Jersey, when we look at that metropolitan area, that area exported $106 billion worth of goods in 2023. So that represents enormous collective purchasing power and enormous coordination potential. So those forward-thinking businesses that are exploring those collaborative procurement for non-competitive inputs, those shared technology platforms for supply chain management, and those coordinated approaches to alternative supplier development, that's really what's key. So the actual economic logic is very straightforward. Regional coordination can reduce individual firm costs while building that collective resilience that we were talking about. When we see that Buffalo is exporting $5.6 billion, Rochester $4 billion, Albany $3 billion, there are natural opportunities for systematic coordination that benefits everyone while preserving their competitive differentiation, regionally speaking. So this, again, is not about losing competitive advantage. It's about leveraging regional scale for foundational capabilities to strengthen everyone's competitive opportunity and position. So really the key takeaway, what we're getting out of this is that it's about strategic planning, right? It's the name of the webinar, right? It's about strategic planning. It's grounded in verified data. And it's about looking at how tariffs potentially have a measurable and immediate impact. We saw 75% of businesses within the region already saying, look, we're doing this, we're passing this along. It's about customer acceptance. It's about talking to the customers and saying, look, this is where we are, this is who we are, this is why we're struggling. So we're not just doing this to exploit you. It's about quickly implementing these changes to find these differentiations. That 30-day threshold for price adjustments that the Fed identified is really key. And it's about geographic diversification. So that systematic adaptation is going to outperform isolated changes across businesses. And that's really what we want to be looking at. So as far as the questions that companies should be asking, according to the Federal Reserve, according to the U.S. Trade Representative, it really is 4 questions. What percentage of my inputs are dependent upon imports? How quickly can I change my pricing system to adjust to volatility? Do I have alternative suppliers that can help me with my critical components? And can I organize? Can I change my system to execute systematic change within 90 days? That's really where economically the data leads us when looking at something like this. So when we look at this, the companies that are doing this are going to emerge stronger. There was a lot of fear around April 2nd, around Liberation Day. We saw stock markets, equity markets all over the world were collapsing, and there was a lot of fear. But a lot of companies stepped up, and they were ready. And just because other companies weren't ready didn't mean they didn't have time to get ready. So here we are, and that's really what I see when I look at the federal data and where we are now. So there you go. Thank you.
Sorry about that. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes.
So just gonna speak on my part. My name is Jermeale Lewis Johnson. So we're gonna talk about the current landscape of what's happening. I did update the slides a little bit because the tariffs are supposed to go into effect yesterday. But right now what's happening, we still have the Section 301 tariffs on China from when Trump was first president. They're still in effect today. So originally they were 25% and 15%. The 25% still remains. The 15% is reduced to 7.5%. We have the fentanyl related tariffs with China being at 20%, Mexico and Canada 20%, unless you can meet the USMCA, the free trade agreement guidelines. Then we have the reciprocal tariffs. All countries are 10% right now. China was reduced again to 10% from 125. The reciprocal tariffs were supposed to go back into effect yesterday, but now it's delayed until August 1st. China, I saw China, Hong Kong, and Macau. I think that's how you say it. It's supposed to go back into effect on the 12th. So it's a lot. It's honestly, it's a lot of numbers and changes. Then there's also aluminum and steel. I know I saw the countries, 50% in the UK, was at 25% if it's smelted or cast in the US, at 0%. In Russia, is 200% for aluminum. I didn't see any for steel specifically. So then they got vehicles and auto parts. Vehicles are at 25%. If you meet the 25-year exemption, then that's at 0%. So there's a lot of changes. I'm constantly checking a spreadsheet like every day for almost everything to make sure there's no mistakes. Um, so the ongoing impact for small and mid-sized importers, reduce cash flow. You don't have as much money to spend as before because you have higher duties to pay. You have to increase your prices, which is not good for the everyday customer. Doesn't want to increase prices, but the tariff costs are passed on to customers, just like he said earlier. Then we got decreased competitiveness. It's hard to compete when you have to increase your prices, so it makes it a little bit more challenging. There's a chance of customer loss. The price sensitive clients seek cheaper alternatives. Regulatory burden. So you have to keep up with all the changes if you're an importer to deal with the tariffs. And there's so many different numbers. Honestly, like I said, it's really hard to keep up. I have a whole spreadsheet with probably like 7, 8 tabs on it that I constantly look at all the time. I'm trying to make sure I use the right codes. You have business uncertainty because, like, if you're a smaller importer, you can't. The higher prices can probably put you out of business. You might not be able to keep up, and now you're charging more. Your clients are looking for cheaper alternatives. You're gonna possibly lose some business there. So domestic sourcing challenges, would be higher price expectations. Domestic goods often come with increased costs, especially with a limited supply. Reduced product availability. Oh, I have a typo. Fewer importers means fewer options on the market. Clients bypass the middleman. So I actually had a client recently. He used to purchase from a company here in the US that would import it, and to save money, he decided to purchase it himself. So that's something that other people are getting cut out of the supply chain because people want to save money. So people are gonna start importing themselves to save on those costs. Let's see what else we have. So, strategic responses to tariffs. You really want to look at your classification. Classification is really important. Are you classifying your product properly? Do you have a clear enough description of your product? Do you have the data specification sheet, the species? Like, you really have to know a lot of details. Sometimes people come to me with classification, and I'm like, there's so much information missing. I'll ask them to send me like a website link. Even what I wrote down there, the MSDS document, just more details as much as they can. And then sometimes I'm just have to keep going back and forth asking a lot of questions. I try to find a justification on a cross ruling, that Customs has previously classified. Sometimes I copy the description in the cross ruling and give it to them and tell them, let me know if this seems similar to your product. And I give them the best judgment. For some people, when their classification is not clear enough, like, we have to go for a binding ruling. And you always want to have justification for your classification. Don't just take someone's word for it, not even mine. You should ask me questions and make sure that I'm doing things properly. Honestly, I will tell you if I feel like I'm unsure about, like, I will always suggest a binding ruling, and I'll tell you I feel more comfortable with you doing that than anything. Look for duty drawback opportunities. So there are some opportunities with 301 duties, drawback is allowed. Lately, with all the changes with the tariffs that Trump has been making, a lot of them don't have drawback opportunities. So you really want to take a good look. Do you want to import this product and take a chance that you can get some of those duties back? Like I said, HCS classification is very crucial because it can affect drawback opportunities as well. So you want to make sure you're classifying, and you want to make sure you have all your paperwork in order, because drawback is it's very detailed. You have to be able to match things up, and if you don't have that in order, you could get rejected from drawback. So strategic responses to tariffs, free trade agreements, FTAs and USMCA opportunities, reciprocal tariffs still apply to free trade agreements, except for USMCA. That was the only difference I saw. You want to supply your certificate of origin. I always tell people if you're going to qualify for a free trade agreement, please give me that. I won't take just your word for it. I need the paperwork because I don't want to have any issues later on. So I'd rather just have it on file. Certificate of origin shift strategies, like think like Vietnam, Mexico. You want to document how the country of origin was determined, list of regulations that you use to justify it. You want to just honestly, like even your bill of material, like any um, production costs or whatever it was that you included, you really want to have like a full detailed thing so they can really look it over and be like, okay, you justified it enough. Because when they come for that audit, you have to have proof. So you want to have everything in order. So you want to do some diversifying. You want to diversify your suppliers. Don't just rely on one vendor. I think that was the biggest challenge people had. Like a lot of people import from China, and they still do to this day. But if you just respond to that, have that one vendor, and then the tariffs were just 125 for China. A lot of people had to start pivoting, and now it takes time to find a new supplier. You can't just pick anybody, and you want to have good quality products. So let's say you're finding another supplier last minute, you don't have that much time. So prepare in advance and have backup. Other countries look into free trade agreements, all those things. Partner with product sourcing agents, find alternate suppliers that way. You want to build your inventory buffers. So think about like during COVID, I've seen a lot of people weren't prepared. You want to buy stuff way in advance. So buying things like 6 months in advance, because think about like natural disasters. Like somebody was waiting for products for like a wedding and like a Hindu wedding, and they with these beautiful garments and everything. And there was a natural disaster and their shipment was delayed. It almost didn't make it in time for the wedding. So you got to plan in advance. Like it, we're already in July, Christmas is in December. You probably should have already ordered everything already just to make sure. You want to buy way in advance and stock up, because then if there's a tariff change last minute, let's say next month, we might have increase in tariffs. You already purchased all your products when the tariffs were lower. You're kind of saving in that way, and you had the product there so you don't have to wait. So supply chain resilience tactics. You want to improve your contract terms with your suppliers, negotiate for the volume that you want. So you want to get lower pricing. So maybe you need to buy more in bulk so that you can get the lower pricing. And like I said, think about the tariff changes. If you know it's increasing next month, you may want to get it now. Especially if you're importing from China, if that's going to go up that much next month, you need to get it now. So tech and data for demand planning. You want to analyze everything. How much do you normally buy during different seasons? Predict how much stock you're going to need. You have to prepare. Like during COVID, there was a company that they were running out of product, and it was like they weren't preparing in advance to order more products. So that when things were happening, those vessels were stuck on the water, they ran out of product, and now they're panicking, rushing to get things. Air freight is more expensive. So if you wait until those situations happen, you're spending so much more money, you're losing out on profits. So think about, you want to keep your profits, plan in advance so you can save. So like I said, natural disasters, ocean shipments, give yourself 1 to 2 month buffer, maybe even more than that when you think about it. Then air shipments, you give yourself like 1 to 2 weeks, because some people, like I was very busy before the tariffs about to hit, so people were panicking. A lot of people were calling, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. I was like, I can't be on the phone all day. But it was a lot of people calling and rushing to get shipments in because they were panicking, thinking the tariffs were about to go up. Like I said, plan in advance so you don't have that worry, that urgency, that stress, because it will be stressful to get your shipments in before those things happen. That's it, guys. Let me stop sharing. There you go.
I think you're muted.
There we go. Can you hear me? And can you see my screen? Okay, great. Okay, hi everyone. I am Lindi Gold, VP of Solution Sales for CargoTrans. As a quick intro, CargoTrans is family owned, privately held, and minority owned. We're celebrating over 35 years in existence. We were founded in 1989 by the DeFilippis family and still run by the DeFilippis family. So we consider ourselves more of a like concierge boutique type logistics service provider. And our goal is to really partner with our customers and find opportunities to truly add value. So we just heard a really good, background of what's happened recently with all these new tariffs. But when we're talking about tariff mitigation, it helps to look like, how did we get here? So for decades, the US kind of championed free trade, minimal tariffs, open markets. But since Liberation Day, we shifted more now towards what they're calling fair trade. And the current administration's goal is to do this, have kind of more of a fair trade. Unfortunately, it's created quite a trade war. And because of this shift, it's made trade more complex and costly. So that's exactly why we believe that strategic mitigation has become more important than ever. So everyone talks about saving money, and obviously that's part of the goal here, but the how is also what matters. So when we are looking at strategies, here's a list of a few of the strategies we help our customers with. They're built really to stand up to CBP's customs brokerage, customs scrutiny. So we've listed a few here, and over the next slide, I'm going to walk through one of the main strategies that we're speaking with our clients about. But here's a list of all of them so you can kind of get an idea, top level of what some of these strategies are. So first sale valuation, I'm not sure if you've heard of this strategy before, but it's one of the most powerful and also recently the most popular tariff mitigation strategies. It's actually not a new program. We've never created it. We didn't create it. This has been around since the 1990s, and it was really popular for so many years in the apparel industry. So specifically, the apparel industry has had high tariffs historically. So now that everyone is experiencing higher tariffs in this current environment, now others are interested in this program as well. But before I go into detail, I'd also like to add that the simple goal of all of our tariff mitigation strategies is to achieve the lowest dutiable value that's defensible. So we can't change the tariffs, even though we'd all like to, and even though it's changing so rapidly every single day, we can't change it. So what we look to do is really find the lowest dutiable value that we can defend to CBP. So first sale, I'm going to tell you a little bit about how this one works in particular because it's been so popular. In many supply chains, there's a middleman or a middle tier between the manufacturer and the US importer. Sometimes that's a trading company, a bank, an export entity. This often exists because the factory, let's say in China, wants to focus on manufacturing and not exporting. And the one who's exporting, that's their specialty. They act as the communication with the US customer. Also, they make a margin, and they also usually receive a tax benefit for the export. So with this type of structure, what's called the first sale valuation rule, there's specific conditions that have to be met, but when they are met, you can declare the first sale, which means the sale between the factory and the middle tier, as the basis for paying your duties, not the higher sale, which is the second sale between the exporter and the US buyer. So as the US importer, you're paying the seller the same price, but the duties are being paid based on the factory price. So how do we implement this? We first conduct a feasibility study. So we want to ensure that there's an opportunity for this middle tier, that there's actually a middle tier that exists. And then we put a report together and present it to customs to ensure that they're aware that you will be declaring for sale moving forward, and showing them the entire report and study and proof. It's an entire audit trail that goes along with it to explain as to why you're paying on a lower dutiable value. There's a few things that you need to have in order to qualify for this. So the first is a bona fide sale between the factory and the middle tier. So they have to be at an arm's length, and there has to be an actual sale that happens between the two of them. The goods have to be clearly destined to the US, and the goods have to be priced at fair market value. So those are a few things to kind of keep, in mind when implementing first sale. And as you can see, there's a little example on the bottom that shows you the savings are significant. So we're seeing anywhere between 10 to 35% savings by implementing this strategy. It's a process. There is a lot of kind of upfront work that needs to be done per supplier. But when you're able to do that, then you can really achieve these types of reductions moving forward. So that's the main strategic or strategy that I wanted to review today. But I also wanted to kind of list a few things to look out for. There's risks in global trade, and you want to make sure that you're partnering with a professional, a customs broker like we are, or a logistics provider that can really assist with these types of things and make sure that you're doing everything legally. So a few things though to keep in mind, because there are risks. So DDP is one that I like to kind of point out. It's a perfectly fine Incoterm to use, but it might sound easy and a good solution to switch to DDP, but there's pitfalls. When the supplier's controlling your logistics, then you lose visibility. It's still your brand and your liabilities on the line. So you really want to make sure that if you make that decision to switch to DDP, that you think about all those other risks. The other thing is that CBP is looking at customers or importers that are switching to DDP because they want to make sure that even though if you're not the importer of record anymore, you're still the consignee, you're still the brand, and that you're doing things legally and making the right decisions. The next one is commercial invoice audits. Undervaluation is a huge red flag. It's important to make sure that your purchase price aligns with fair market value. CBP will also see if something looks like it's undervalued, has an undervaluation. And so just make sure that you keep an eye on that as well. Classification risk, Jermeale mentioned this one. Misclassifying HTS codes is one of the top CBP violations. As the importer of record, you need to really show proof that you classified things and that you have a defensible reason as to why it's classified under that code. And so you have a responsibility to use the correct or a defensible HTS code. Origin fraud is the next one. So some suppliers, or factories or, different people in the industry, they might claim that they can avoid China tariffs by routing goods to another country. But be careful of this, because unless there's something what CBP calls substantial transformation, then it's fraud. So for instance, I'll give you an example. We have a duvet or comforter manufacturer, and they were bringing the final product into the US and paying a certain duty on that. But what they found is that they could actually bring the fabric into Mexico, bring the stuffing into Mexico. So it's two different products, not a duvet when it's by itself, brought it into Mexico, had their Mexican factory create the duvet with those different products, and had a substantial transformation of the good. And then they were able to export that or import that into the US under USMCA. And by doing that, they were able to save a ton of money. So there's a lot of ways where, you know, changing the origin or moving things to different countries can work, but you have to make sure you have substantial transformation. Otherwise, it's fraud. So customs will come in for an audit and see that there was no actual transformation. You just moved it from one country to the other. And the origin that it really started with was, you know, the original one. The next one to take into consideration is the de minimis enforcement. So the duty-free threshold was under $800, but now it's been eliminated. So that's for your small parcel shipments. And, you know, maybe that was, you didn't have to pay duties on those before, but now it's being included. So just take account of that. The next one is liquidation timing. So in the US, we are given the privilege as importers of immediate release when clearing customs. So right when your customs broker gets the entry, they are given the privilege of immediate release. And then, you know, things go on their way. But that doesn't mean you're in the clear. CBP actually has, I think it's, Jermeale, correct me if I'm wrong, 314 days to review and challenge any entry. So just be aware of that, you know, some people say, hey, it went through, we got, you know, customs cleared, but just know that that's not actually the case. There's audits being done throughout the year. And then the last one is bond exposure. Because of all these higher duties, it means that your customs bond may no longer be sufficient. So make sure to monitor the risk closely and look out for that. I'm not going to go into detail through all of these, but I just wanted to note that other than tariff mitigation strategies, that's just one part of our broader trade advisory support. So there's tons of other solutions and ways to help look at your trade compliance. So HTS classification, gap analysis, duty drawback programs like Jermeale spoke about earlier, compliance manuals to make sure that your compliance is in the right order and you have everything written out to show customs if you needed to. CTPAT certification is a great program that CBP put out to help with you know, becoming a known importer, and then other things like PGA consulting and many more. So whether you're starting from scratch or you're you know, enhancing an existing compliance program, these are different ways that you can or we can help build different solutions. So next I want to go through a quick just intro to CargoTrans Customs Control Tower. So this is a unique solution that we provide because it's where everything kind of connects. So I'm sure Jermeale would agree with this. In our experience, when we're providing any type of tariff mitigation strategy or trade advisory, the best outcomes happen when we're also managing the customs brokerage. So this gives us the ability to implement strategies correctly, enforce consistency across all freight forwarders, and then also, you know, proactively monitor for new opportunities and really looking into all the details and all the data. So our control tower in particular includes customs brokerage, trade advisory, and then we also have this visibility tool called Captain. And with this kind of like centralized model, we're able to centralize compliance, oversight with, you know, tariff mitigation strategies, have that visibility through Captain. There's strategic document management and really no blind spots. So even across multiple providers, you have the visibility of everything to really have, you know, less surprises, increased savings, really a greater peace of mind. And then I just wanted to briefly show what Captain, you know, a slide on Captain, because under our control, our customs control tower, this tool gives you visibility of all the data, regardless of who the freight forwarder is. So if we're your customs broker, it's all in this control tower, this centralized point where we give GPS tracking, real-time visibility, dashboards, strategic analytics, reporting, proactive alerts. And so you kind of think of it like a digital supply chain assistant, and it's designed to help our customers scale as they grow. So tariff mitigation is one part of the things that we're helping with, things to look out for. But our control tower is the solution to put it all together. And that's really it. So that's a high level overview of how we're helping companies, especially related to tariff mitigation strategy. I wanted to really highlight First Sale. I think it's one that is most popular, but maybe some on the call aren't familiar with. So if you have more questions, I'd be happy to help.
Wonderful, everyone. Thank you so much. Everything was incredibly useful, and I'm sure our attendees enjoyed. We have a few questions, but before that, I would like for Harry here to take over and introduce himself. He unfortunately had another meeting, so he couldn't join right away. So Harry, do you want to jump on this very quickly?
Sure. Thank you, Nadia. So my name is Harry Chen. I'm the Director of Economic Development and Management for Commerce. And I want to say thank you again to our guest speaker today for the insightful webinar on tariff. And thank you all for joining us today. So now we still have about 5 minutes. Maybe we can take questions. Thank you.
So I would start with the first. We don't have that many questions, so I think we can quickly cover all of them. So Giacomo, the first one is for you. When you say NYC is the largest region, so I know if you wrote the question, if you want to answer that, that would be fantastic.
So we're talking about the ports. We're talking about companies that need to access international trade. They're doing that through us. They're doing that through Port Elizabeth, through Port Newark, through New York. So that's there's no other way to frame it. So if you want access to the United States of America, it's New York. And so there are other parts of New York, there are other cities that have some international exposure and some ability to do that. But right now, this is where it is.
Fantastic. So we have Cindy and Maggie already replied to your questions. So we will go to Patrick's question. I don't know, Patrick, you were asking perhaps a question to Jermeale, I believe, or who else? To Giacomo, maybe? Anyway, you were asking, what if we don't have the money to buy and stockpile now, nor the space to store it as a small business storefront in Manhattan?
Yeah, Jermeale was talking about about buying stuff ahead of time as a strategy to prevent what might happen.
Well, in reference to that, there's a lot of warehouses actually that you can work out deals with. Some of them, if they know that you're going to have consistent business with them, you can work out deals if you have a higher volume. Like I said, a lot of places are willing to work with you if you have higher volumes and they'll see consistent business. So I think you could work out some plans. You never know.
Wonderful. So we still have some times. Just want to touch base with Cindy question, which she asked, does the MCC have resources to help located alternative manufacturers, both here in New York City and elsewhere? I'm specifically looking for garment fabric manufacturers. Maggie replied that she can check the SBA, but if you have anything to add on, please, everybody, you can jump in.
I can add, I actually know some different product sourcing agents in different countries. India, I think there's one in Turkey. Brazil, Spain. So if you want to reach out to me, I can connect you with a couple of them. I try to save everyone's information, so I have like a whole list of people.
Wonderful. If our speakers today would like to share your email, please drop them now on the chat room. So everyone that would like to speak with you directly can do that. Later today, as Maggie suggested, we will send the slides of today presentations, and we are here to help as a chamber. So you can also email the help desk at manhattancc.org for any question that you might have. And as events manager, director at the Manhattan Chamber of Commerce, I would like to recommend checking our events page. If you are interested in learning more about the chamber, you can also visit our page of becoming a member of the chamber. I'm dropping the link as well. So if anyone has any final notes to share, please do.
The main thing I would say is just make sure you research in advance. A lot of people don't. It costs a lot of money to not research in advance. I'm actually looking for trucking for someone right now, and it seems to be very hard because they have a reefer container and it has to go across multiple state lines and it's above weight. So there's a lot of problems trying to help them. So if you guys work with your freight forwarder or customs brokers in advance or even international trade lawyers, we can help avoid some of those costly mistakes that you may be making.
Wonderful. Maggie, anything else that you would like to say before we go?
No, just thank you everyone for joining.
All right. Thank you, everyone. This was wonderful. I hope to see you all soon to any of our events, and have a good rest of the day. Thank
Thank you
you.
all.
Thank you.